Michelle Troconis' sentencing hearing was today. First, court dealt with a motion in respect to vacating conspiracy convictions. The defense referenced cases I haven't read and memoranda I haven't read. But the bottom line issue here is double jeopardy about convicting and sentencing a person multiple times for a single crime. The prosecution argues that there were days between the different conspiracies in respect to the tampering. The judge cited case law and said that acts of concealment that are only to cover up the crime do not extend the original conspiracy, meaning the conspiracy to commit murder and the conspiracy to commit tampering are different things. However, 2 instances of the tampering follow only one unlawful agreement. So count 4 was vacated, but conspiracy to murder and 1 conspiracy to tamper would stand. The prosecution at that point requested the judge's permission to appeal. The attorneys discussed the pre-sentence report, and the judge said that in the pre-sentence report, the maximum sentence that they have listed is incorrect. The maximum sentence for one of the crimes is 20 years. The judge also pointed out that the facts contained in the pre-sentence report were taken from warrants and not taken from facts adduced at trial. This is important in any case. It's particularly important here because through the trial, we learned that a number of things that were in warrants and reports were completely false. The defense took issue with the allegation within the report that Fotis Doulos and Michelle Troconis authored their timelines together, when there's evidence that the first time Michelle saw Fotis's timeline was during her police interview. He also took issue with the allegation in respect to the paper towels and how it stated it didn't smell like coffee. But she never said that. What she said was she never smelled the paper towel at all. There was also the insinuation or the allegation that the timing of Michelle's actions that she told police were not corroborated by her cell data. But it turns out that what Michelle told police was corroborated by her cell phone data. Also, the detective reported that together they shuffled the Tacoma, and the defense said, wait a minute, Doulos took the Tacoma to the car wash. Troconis picked up Doulos to go to an appointment with an attorney, and it may seem like an insignificant detail there, but I think that is important for the record. The defense also pointed out that contained in the report was Detective Kimball's false statement about Troconis saying she was washing windows when she never said that. Even Detective Kimball had to admit that was false. And the defense wanted that removed. And again, might not seem like a big deal, but it is important for the record. The defense said there were a number of other things contrary to the evidence, but they weren't material. So the defense wasn't going to go through it all and bring it all up. And this is just a friendly reminder that while warrants and police reports are useful and informative, they aren't actually evidence. The judge said within the summary and recommendations of the PSR, these concerns were somewhat mitigated, and he quoted a statement right from the PSR, which was, the extent of her role in the offense is not fully clear. And I think that statement is significant. The prosecution got up first, and court heard from the victims. Troconis was visibly emotional during the statements of Jennifer's children. All through the trial, she didn't show huge emotion, but hearing those kids made Michelle weep. I'm not going to get deep into statements of loved ones on either side. There are a couple of things I want to point out. And one is the statement by Jennifer Dulos' loved ones provide a tiny bit of insight into but the tip of the iceberg of the impact and the lifelong losses suffered by so many after a homicide. It's always more than just the direct victim who suffered, and there is nothing that will truly repair that. Carrie Luft, a friend of Jennifer's, said she was the one who saw the document on Michelle's laptop. Luft also called that report a discredited document. I always thought that Fotis somehow fabricated either the information or perhaps even the document itself, and this remark by Luft lends credence to that. I'm not saying I know that's what happened, because I don't. I will say it's common for abusers to try to make the victim appear unwell, unstable, unreliable, and unfit. And it's such a common tactic that you wait for it. The prosecution made remarks about the impact of the victims. The prosecution asked for the maximum sentence of 45 years. The defense wanted to correct the perception that Michelle was the cause of the breakup between Jennifer and Fotis. The defense points out that Fotis was insisting to Michelle that he and Jennifer had separated and that Jennifer was okay with it. They moved on. Jennifer was fine with Michelle moving in, and the defense lawyer referenced a stack of text messages that they have. He also pushed back on this idea that the prosecution put forth that the motive was so Michelle could replace Jennifer. He also said that in respect to the divorce, Michelle only knew what Fotis or Fotis's attorneys told her. He pointed out that Michelle took the police through areas where she knew that Fotis went so she could show them those areas. And in respect to the suggestion that Michelle is not disclosing the location of Jennifer's remains, the defense pointed out that all of the evidence points to Michelle not knowing where Jennifer is. A number of people got up on behalf of Troconis, including her pastor, her parents, and there were a couple of things that people said in common. And one was they all believed Fotis. And through the trial, he was revealed to be a very different man. People spoke of Michelle's care for others, her generosity, and her hard work for other people. And there were enough examples from enough different time frames to show that this is a pattern of behavior. And those of you who've listened to me for a while know that I make a distinction between a pattern of behavior and a time-limited behavior or situation-limited behavior. Almost everyone spoke to Michelle's generosity. And I want to note that a person who is generous is someone Fotis would target for seduction. Jennifer's parents financed his business. He didn't earn that and build that by himself. Michelle's parents had some means. Once Fotis could no longer rely on the Farber family's money, Fotis would have to ensure he had someone else to use. When Michelle moved out of Jefferson Crossing, another woman very quickly moved in. I know nothing about that woman, but I can't help but wonder if she or her family also had some financial means. One of the people who got up to speak told the story of a cab driver who had invited Michelle to his house, and she was oblivious to even the thought that he might not be a good person and that might not be a good idea. Witness after witness got up and spoke in support of Michelle, describing similar behaviors, a similar personality. I want to say that nothing said in support of Michelle diminishes in any way the fact that what happened to Jennifer Dulos was horrific, that the losses suffered by many are extreme, and Fotis Dulos is a piece of work, and the words I want to say about him, I can't say on YouTube. The defense was running out of time. There were more people there to get up and speak, but there wasn't enough time for it. And the judge mentioned that he had 63 letters of support for Michelle. Michelle's daughter got up to speak, and that was heartbreaking too. All of these children have lost their parents, and Michelle's daughter is going to lose her mom. The defense pointed out that during the trial, no one, including the jury, had any understanding of who Michelle was. The only thing anybody heard was whatever was reported by the media. She lived a life of service. She had no history of violence, quite the opposite. She had no criminal record. And he mentioned something too, and that was when Michelle used her money to support her daughter, she bought a condo. Instead of investing her money into his company, he became angry with her. The defense beseeched the court, don't sentence Michelle for what Fotis did. And it's clear he does not believe that she actually really knew anything or did anything to help. And he said, even if she did do something, it didn't really help Fotis complete his crime. He was going to do what he did anyway. And he stressed, Michelle is not a substitute for Fotis. He understands the anger that people have. And really, how could you not understand that? But he pleads, because you can't punish Fotis, don't make her a substitute. And he talked of comparative culpability. And sometimes somebody involved can have a small amount of knowledge or a very minor role, or they can have a very major role or have full knowledge. And he pointed out that Pavel did have knowledge. He knew there might be DNA on those seats and he got rid of them anyway. He lied to police. He hid things until he couldn't. He did help Fotis, but Pavel got a free pass plus American citizenship. And Pavel had more knowledge and more participation, even by Pavel's own admission, than Michelle did. And in light of that, and the fact that Michelle has been limited in where she can go, she has been confined in a way, had to wear a monitor and all of that. Pavel didn't have to do any of that. And the defense said, in light of all that, he's asking for probation. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. And Michelle got up to speak. And she said she was sorry for all the suffering of so many people. She said she thought she knew Fotis, and she found out after the crime, before and during the trial, who he really was and what he did. And she regrets ever being in a relationship with him and ever bringing him into her daughter's life. And that is one of the things that has been clear from the very beginning, is that her priority was her daughter. And if she believed that he was this killer, why would she put her daughter in that position? And this is basically what she's saying. She thanked the court for letting her speak, and the judge took a recess to consider everything he had just heard. The judge talked about the sentencing ranges, and for the biggest count, the range is between 1 and 20 years. So a minimum of 1, a maximum of 20. But then you add in all the rest of the charges. And he said right away that the sentence was going to be concurrent. He spoke to the principles of sentencing, mentioned that not all factors are given equal weight depending on the nature and circumstances of the crime. He said the court has no bond with anyone who spoke or anyone involved, that the court can consider evidence at sentencing that would not be admissible at trial, and that includes good or bad. He said court does not deliberate with the jury and does not deliberate on evidence at all, and that The court has no view of the evidence. The court has a verdict. And he talked about the jury, that the jury may draw reasonable inferences based on evidence that they could draw. And he went through these inferences that the jury could draw. Fotis was not at home, but Michelle said he was. When he got home, Michelle didn't ask him where he was. And the jury can draw an inference that she didn't ask because she knew. She said she saw Kent and Fotis in the office, but as it turns out, she did not see both of them, and the jury can draw an inference from that. Michelle answered Fotis's phone. The jury could draw an inference that she answered it in order to help him. She didn't go to the door when the police came. The jury could make the inference she knew the reason the police were there, and that's why she didn't go to the door. She was with Fotis during his disposal of evidence, and her DNA was found on one of the bags. Well, the jury could infer that she knew that he was disposing of evidence. She was cleaning at 80 Mountain Springs. The jury could infer she was cleaning evidence. The jury could infer that she didn't forget various facts. He said the jury concluded that any doubts they had were not reasonable. He said sentencing is dispassionate. He says, there are questions, age-old questions. Should the court adopt public opprobrium? When does retribution become revenge? What's the role of empathy? At sentencing, he has to consider the nature and circumstances of the offense and the history and background of the offender. And he pointed out that often the good and the bad are both true. He said that victims have the right to speak at sentencing. The court uses this to assign proper weight in the principles of sentencing. To shorten the list of what he said in respect to what her sentence was, I'll tell you, because it is concurrent, we'll talk about the maximum one. He sentenced her to 20 years, suspended at 14 years, plus 5 years probation. And then he went down the list and sentenced her for the rest of them in a similar fashion. So ultimately, the sentence is 20 years, and I know you're going to be hearing 14 and a half years, and I'll get to that in a second. But the sentence was 20 years, and it's suspended after 14. And the reason that's important is because it's going to matter when it comes down to calculations of what she'll actually have to serve in Connecticut, assuming she's of good behavior and all of that. But if she was to serve the full thing, it would be 14 and a half years in prison plus the 5 years probation. He said she has the right to appeal, and the defense said, yeah, we intend to appeal. And he asked for an appeal bond. Her family has not been able to raise the money for the earlier bond. And the defense started to try and negotiate a bond, and the judge just interrupted him and said he's not setting an appeal bond. Now, this whole thing is not over, and it's not going to be over. Jennifer Dulos has still not been found. And the family needs that. So even all this much time later, if you have any information about where she might be, if you saw something, heard something, anything that might help the family or help the authorities find Jennifer Dulos, please speak up. And Kent Mawhinney has yet to stand trial. Maybe we'll be able to learn a little more from that trial. That's all I've got for you for now. Trust your gut. I'll see you in the comments.